Over here on the board, I've written another formula that involves the number pi. It's the formula for the volume of a sphere. It's the capacity of a sphere, like if you were to have a ball or something. The volume is 4/3 times pi r cubed. Now, this formula involves both a fraction 4/3 and a decimal. You know, we're using 3.14 as our approximation for pi. So a fraction and a decimal both in the same formula right here. So in this section, what we're going to do is work with fractions and decimals at the same time. Let's go to the board and look at our first problem. For problem number 1, we want to convert 7/8 to a decimal. Now what I'm going to do is use my definition of fractions as meaning division. This means 7 divided by 8, so I'm actually going to divide 8 into 7 with long division. So 8 divided into 7 point, and I'll give myself a little room to work here. I'll put some zeros on. So 8 into 7, that won't go, so I'll have 0. My decimal point goes right here. 8 goes into 70 3 times. No, let's see. 8 goes into 70. Let's try 8. Okay, 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract 4 from 10, I get 6. 6 from 6 will be 0 when I borrow there. Bring down that 0. Let's try 7. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract here, I get 4. 5 from 5 will be 0 after I borrow 1 from that 6. Bring down that 0, and that goes in there exactly 5 times. So the fraction 7/8 as a decimal is 0.875. 0.875 is the decimal equivalent of the fraction 7/8, and I find it by using my definition for this fraction here as meaning 7 divided by 8. And so now, since I know how to do division with decimal numbers, I'll just divide that 8 into 7. Let's try another one of these. Let's convert 3/11ths to a decimal, and let's agree just to round to the nearest thousandth if it goes any further than that. So I'm going to divide 11 into 3. So 11 divided into 3, and then I'm going to give myself a little room to work here. 11 goes into 3 0 times. Put that decimal point right there. 11 goes into 30 2 times. 2 times 11 is 22. I subtract 2 from 10, I get 8. 2 from 2 will be 0. Bring down the next number, which is 0. 11 goes into 87 times. 7 times 11 is 77. Subtract, and I'll get 3. Bring down that 0, and I have 30. 11 goes into 30. Let's say 2 times. 2 times 11 is going to be 22. Let me just take this up over here. I think you can see what I'm doing. When I multiply 2 times 11, I get 22, and that's what I have to subtract from 30. 2 from 0 is going to be 8. 2 from 2 is 1. I would bring down another 0. That would give me a 0 right here. 11 would go into that 7 times. So let's agree that we want to go to the nearest thousandth. So what I do is I divide to one place past the place that I want to round to. So I want to round to the nearest thousand, so I'll divide to one place past that to the nearest 10,000, and then I'll round back to this place. So to the nearest thousand, 3 over 11 is going to be equal to 0.273 when I round this decimal number to the nearest thousand. So in order to change this fraction into a decimal, what I do is divide the denominator into the numerator, and then if it doesn't go in evenly, I decide on some place to round to, and I go one place past that with my division, then I round back to that. Let's look at our next problem. We want to convert 0.375 to a fraction. So I want to go from a decimal now to a fraction. So this is 375 tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So it's 375 over 1,000. So there, see, I have converted it to a fraction right here. Now all that's left to do is to reduce that fraction to lowest term. So let's give that a try. Let's see, I want to factor this numerator. I know 5 divides into it. 5 goes into there. Let's see. 7 times 5 is 35. 25, 75 times. And 5 divides into there 200 times. So let's see, I have 5 times 75 is 3 times 25, so 3 times 5 times 5. So 3 times 5 times 5. And this will be 5 times 200 will be 2 times 100, so 2 times 5, 2 times 4 times 25, so 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. We don't have to factor it completely like this, but I thought I'd give it a shot. Okay, divide out the 5s, divide out these 5s, divide out these 5s, and we end up with a fraction in lowest terms of 3/8. So converting a decimal into a fraction is really a pretty easy process. The only hard part of this problem, if there is a hard part to it, is simply reducing that fraction to lowest terms. Here's a problem now that involves both fractions and decimals. I want to multiply 1/2 times the sum of 2.3 and 2.5. So I have a lot of options right here. I think what I'll do is just start inside the parentheses and keep these decimals right here and write this as 1/2 times 2.3 plus 2.5 is 4.8. Now 1/2 times 4.8 is just going to be half of 4.8, or 4.8 over 2 if I multiply. Divide 2 into there and I end up with 2.4. So that problem simplifies nicely if I just leave the fraction a fraction and the decimal a decimal and work that way. Sometimes it helps to convert your fractions into decimals before you start, but in this case it was just as easy to do it this way. If I had have done it the other way, I might have changed this to 0.5. If I multiply 0.5 times 4.8, I'm still going to get 2.4, so you really can't go wrong. Here's another problem. How about 2/3 times 0.3 and then 3/5 times 0.3? Well, let's see. This will be kind of hard to change to a decimal. Let's change our decimals to fractions and see what happens. 2/3 times 0.3 is 3/10 plus 3/5 times 0.3, which is 3/10. Now let's just see what we get here. So I'll divide these out, divide that 2 out. When I multiply over here, I end up with 1/5 plus, here I don't have anything to divide out. 3 times 3 is 9. 5 times 10 is 50. So I get 1/5 plus 9 over 50. I want to add those two fractions, so let's see. I'll make this multiply by 10 over 10. So I end up with 10 over 50 plus 9 over 50. So I end up with 19 over 50. Now if I want, this is my answer as a fraction. If I want to write my answer as a decimal, I'd have to change into a hundredths. So I could multiply this and this by each by 2, and so I'd end up with 38 over 100, so I'd have 0.38 for the decimal answer to that. But in this case, I kept it as a fraction, and 19 over 50, that's a good enough answer for me. Let's try another problem. I have 0.25 squared plus 1/4 squared times 3. Let's see, I recognize this 0.25 as being 1/4, and since I have a 1/4 right here, let's just change this to a fraction. 1/4 squared plus 1/4 squared times 3. So 1/4 squared is 1/16 plus 1/4 squared is 1/16 times 3. I end up with 1/16 plus 1/16 times 3 is 3/16. So what do we have here? 1/16 plus 3/16, 4/16. I can reduce that to lowest terms by dividing out the common factor 4. I get 1/4. So my answer as a fraction is 1/4. If I wanted to write my answer as a decimal, it would be 0.25, the decimal equivalent of 1/4. So either way we want to write the answer, it's a very simple conversion. 1/4 and 0.25 is one of those fraction decimal combinations that you need to have memorized. So in this problem right here, it seemed to work out very simply if I took this decimal and converted it to a fraction. Sometimes it works out to go in that direction. Sometimes it works out better to go in the other direction. Let's look now at the find the volume of a sphere. It says find the volume of a sphere with a radius of 2 miles. So I want the volume of a sphere. Remember, it's a figure that looks like this, like a beach ball or whatever. This has a radius of 2 miles. The formula for the volume of a sphere is V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. And pi is 3.14, so I have 4/3 times 3.14 times 2 cubed. So 4/3 times 3.14 times 8. And if I do this arithmetic right here, multiply 4 times this times 8, divide what I get by 3, I end up with, let's see, 33.49 cubic miles. So I won't actually do that arithmetic right there. I just wanted to use the formula and get it down to this point right here so that you could see it's a formula that involves both a fraction and a decimal. So I take this radius 2 for the sphere, plug it into the formula right here. That's 2 cubed. Then I get 8. If I do this arithmetic, and you can check it yourself, you'll end up with 33.49, and then the units are cubic miles, because this r is to the third power, and the units on r would be miles, so miles to the third power, we get cubic miles. So that's a look at some problems that involve both fractions and decimals.